Without social workers, Trinidad and Tobago would descend into more social instability. We as social workers or social service practitioners have to go out there to not just lend that psychosocial and investigative support service, but build trust. Sometimes a victim does not know that they are a victim. We transforming persons from victims to victors. A case that I had with a child who was a victim of sexual abuse. When we looked at the case, the uncle in the family was abusing other children. And another real example is...
Welcome to Therapy Talks, the podcast. I am your host, Masudah Muhammad, and I have with me here the lovely Samantha Griffith. She is the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Social Workers. And this month is May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we are going to delve into the conversation of social work and its impacts on Trinidad and Tobago. So welcome, Ms. Griffith. It's nice to have you on.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Masudah, for having me, especially given May Mental Health Awareness Month and the importance, of course, of social work in the space of May Mental Health Awareness.
Yeah, so social work is such a dynamic field. Yeah. Right? So, and sometimes we engage in so many activities as social workers, and it's so amazing that we have an association.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about the association? How the social workers interact in the association? Just basically, what is this association about?
All right. Well, the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Social Workers is a 20-year-old professional body representing social workers and advancing in terms of communities and individuals' welfare. How we do that, or how we interact, is through collaboration and networking with other social workers, advocacy, which is a central point of social work, training and development, and research, because research will inform present-day issues, challenges, how do we pivot in terms of societal issues, and inform that in terms of push for that individual and community welfare.
Nice. Yeah. And we need that in Trinidad.
Yes, we do.
So who is the social workers in the association? Where do they function?
That's a really good question, because sometimes people still are of the opinion social workers are just counselors.
Yeah.
Or social workers are just helpers in the sense of helping in terms of welfare and grants. But social workers are much more than that. Social workers now are in so many spaces. So we have forensic social workers who operate in the judicial and policing systems. We have health social workers or mental health social workers who operate in hospitals and mental health institutions. School social workers, of course, the name says it all, in schools.
Yeah.
Youth social workers, community social workers. We have research social workers. We have social workers in sport. And one of the areas that is developing in Trinidad and Tobago is social workers in sport. So when you look at Dr. Charlene Boudram at UE, she really is advancing sports and the issues of psychosocial areas affecting in terms of players, and what that does in terms of empowering and moving in terms of the profession forward. So how it impacts on the ability of players, those psychosocial issues, and how they can overcome to become better players. So social workers are you can find them in any field and sector of society, not just helping or welfare. We've moved away from that, and we have expanded in so many forms, because social workers sit at seats, not just when persons need that support, but at advocacy levels, policy levels, and as I said before, research levels. So it's different things you have to connect. So we are in various arenas and lending that type of support with our skill sets, because of course social workers are not just trained in social work, but in various multifaceted things such as psychology, counseling, criminology, HR. So it because of the type of work we do and skills that we have.
Right. And I love how you mentioned the different types of social workers, especially in communities.
Yes.
Because in Trinidad and Tobago, we have communities that is very at risk, especially with our growing crime situation. So how does social workers influence the communities? And what is some of the areas you have seen improve because of the social workers?
Oh, that's a really good question, because social workers at community levels, we look at not just, of course, we one of the theories that we use is the ecological system theory. And that looks at the whole person from individual level and the things that affect the individual at the community level and things that affect the person in the community. And of course, at that macro level with policies and initiatives that would impact as well as the person and communities. And all of it is interconnected. We have seen social workers in spaces, and let me give you a real life example.
Yeah.
I worked in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service with the Victim and Witness Support Unit. Now, the Victim and Witness Support Unit is one of a kind in the Caribbean, if you want to call it that. They have social workers or social service providers, social workers, psychologists, etc., working alongside police officers. So civilians working alongside police officers within the police service, lending support, psychosocial investigative support to victims and witnesses of crime. And that client population is very, how should I say, not trusting of the police sometimes. It is could be very explosive, that client population. And we as social workers or social service practitioners have to go out there to not just lend that psychosocial and investigative support service, but build trust. And sometimes a victim does not know that they are a victim. You could be living in a community and you have secondary trauma. Because you're in that community for so long and crime, you're desensitized. Or you might be in a domestic violence relationship and you're desensitized to violence, etc. Or your children. So we go into those communities at that level to build trust, to bring the support to the community. And we work alongside, as I said, we're building trust with police officers because we work alongside police. And you could see in terms of the issues that might arise with that, as I said, the not trusting of police, not recognizing that you're a victim or need support, and the issues continue to play on within the community. And at that level as well, you also have the interplay, not just about the social services that you're bringing, but transforming communities and meeting people where they're at. So a victim, and I always remember our former manager saying, we transforming persons from victims to victors. And bringing those services to them to transform them. And another real example is a case that I had with a child who was a victim of sexual abuse. And, she had the courage to talk to the community policing officer. She trusts the community policing officer. And had that courage to speak out about what was happening to her at the home. When we looked at the case, the uncle in the family was abusing other children within the community, but no one spoke out. And from there, that ripple effect that we had with that intervention of counseling and also empowering as well as preparing her for court and for the interviews with the police, really set in terms of that investigative strongness or resilience for that case to move forward effectively through the justice system. So that is the type of impact that we've been having in communities, and that's why I say I wanted to bring that real life example of when communities are often at a place of not just vulnerability but not trusting another institution, how social workers can bridge that gap.
Wow, we really need these social workers, especially where vulnerable populations are, because oftentimes vulnerable populations, they do feel neglected and isolated and judged. And I know one of the principles of social workers is non-judgmental. And another principle is confidentiality. So bringing those two pieces of puzzles together, we're able to now see how social workers are able to really penetrate the vulnerable populations in our country. And this is such an important role that social workers play. So, as we continue to talk about the importance of the social workers, can you tell me what will Trinidad and Tobago look like without social workers, without these services?
You're asking some really good, hard-hitting questions here, Masudah. Trinidad and Tobago without social workers, Trinidad and Tobago would descend into more social instability. We would have more vulnerability in terms of populations and also limited or a decreasing access to services. Because social workers meet persons at the first ground level, or the first tier of when a person is in crisis or having the worst time of their lives, or just don't know what to do. But if you don't have social workers in Trinidad and Tobago, we can't connect them to services. We can't offer counseling. We can't, in terms of network with other bodies to ensure that, a service or translating the bureaucracy and that referral process to someone else. We would not, in terms of, we will descend into, a very decaying society without social workers, because social workers provide that vital and critical service to all sectors at all levels. So at the individual level, at the community level, and as I said, at the macro level. So social workers play a critical part of connecting persons, communities to services, and to translating also the services and the service delivery to them. Social workers are not just, as I said, not just helpers or counselors, but we work in terms of policy level to translate policies that may not be maybe social injustice to another sector. So you might think it's a great policy or a great strategy or a great legislation that you're bringing forward, but it may be making another sector vulnerable. So social workers use their voices to advocate against particular things. For in terms of social injustices, etc. So when you don't have social workers at the seats at national development or in Trinidad and Tobago, you have all of those levels being affected. And as I said, social instability, vulnerability, and decrease to me in the uses of services, because people would know, and then social workers are the ones who would advance those social services. So if you don't have social workers, you wouldn't have access to student support, you wouldn't have access to those welfare grants. And although persons may say, but you might have an intake officer, they can't do, or somebody else replace us. They can't do the work that we do, or the skill set that takes to do the work that we do. Because it requires, as I said, holding someone's hand at their most vulnerable and walking them through not just systems, but particular, connecting them to particular other agencies and other services to ensure that they get the required care and attention.
And that is so important, because some people don't always trust the police, or they don't always trust another service provider. But because social workers build healthy relationships, then they're able to say, well, I want to talk to my social worker. I want to call my social worker. And this is when you build that relationships, because some persons don't even have family members or close friends and a social worker with skills. Because social workers are highly trained professionals, and they do have their master's degrees, PhDs, and they are able to now impart that knowledge onto the vulnerable populations and give them the support that is needed. So we do need social workers, and I think without social workers, this country is not going to be, where it needs to be.
Total anarchy might happen and all, because as you said, if we don't have that middleman, so to speak, coordinating and helping walk you through, educating, empowering, equipping you the skills, coordinating, networking, all those really fancy words. How, in terms of persons, will just be, lost in systems. They will be lost in terms of increases in terms of abuse, increases in terms of school violence. And those are some of the things that we're seeing in terms of the social fabric of society. So social workers are needed for that stability. They are needed to, as I said, for social injustices and things that we may think at particular levels, or we may not even think or realize may be injustices to another group of persons. And I think that is at the root of social work. Advocacy, and the TTASW and social workers in general stand on the backs of some stalwarts who fought against social injustice, who advocated for particular changes for particular groups, who empowered us, for us to even have a seat at the table here. Audrey Jeffers, Verna St. Rose, Margaret Sampson Brown, Hazel Brown, Jackie Burgess, all of these people, they have created, Gia Gaspar Taylor, they have created this space and used their voice to really highlight those social injustices or groups of vulnerable people and giving them a voice and giving us a voice in its totality to be where we are today.
Yes, and I like that you was able to acknowledge the pioneers, right?
Yeah,
the heads.
Yeah.
Because we need that. And the next thing is that, social workers are a very unique profession. It's not just counseling. It's not just holding a vulnerable person's hand, but it's really navigating through the system. And sometimes navigating through the system, we have a lot of roadblocks.
Yes.
And social workers are able to break down the roadblocks and say, my client needs intervention. My client needs support. My client needs resources. And without the social workers, there's no voice. Nobody talks. There's no advocating voice for the voiceless. There's no one to hold someone's hand and say, let's go through this whole process.
Yeah.
So sometimes if the social workers are not in the communities and they are not in the schools and they are not in the homes, because we have different types of social workers, as you mentioned earlier, then it really does leave a gap, a social gap, where we don't have every single social organization that could respond to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
We need social workers.
To stand in the gap.
Exactly.
To stand in the gap.
To stand in the gap.
Yeah.
So it's so important to acknowledge the work that social workers do. Because sometimes, realistically, we don't see the acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Social workers are not always highlighted.
Yeah.
And that, sometimes the public may not have an idea of, yes, we have these social workers, but what do they do?
Yeah.
What this is about, right? And we may have persons who want to become social workers. So where do they start? Can you tell? Like, if I want to be a social worker, where can I start?
Well, I like what you said in terms of sometimes the work we do is not recognized. I want to just touch on that a bit.
Yeah.
Because social work is I don't want to say silent work because sometimes we have to be loud as well.
Yeah.
But it's really silently in the background, coordinating and walking your client through all of those phases.
Yeah.
Going to where someone who's interested in starting social work, we have, I believe, it's 4 colleges in Trinidad and Tobago that offer, and I'm just talking locally. I mean, internationally, you have different universities that offer social work courses. So in Trinidad, to practice social work, you need a bachelor's degree in social work. We have COSTAT, UE, USC, and Caribbean Nazarene College. I hope I'm not forgetting anybody. But that's locally. You apply in terms of the usual application process during the times that they advertise for their semester starting. And you apply at those universities to do your social work bachelor's degree. And it's about a 3 to 4 year program. Within the degree, of course, you have an internship because social work is a very practical thing. So there are various levels of internships that you have to do, or practicum that we call it, where you are buddied with experienced social worker to get that experience. You might have mock practicums, etc. What I want to say too is social work in Trinidad, because we have so many people working in so many spaces, there's also specialities. So like the forensic social work. So you can also look at particular courses to further that specialty, because you might work in the judicial, and as I said, policing system as a social worker. You may be categorized internationally when we have things like licensure, etc., as a forensic social worker because of the industry that you work in. And you may want to have some specialty training, such as forensic interviewing, trauma-informed care, things like that, to further advance the work and specialty that you do within a particular industry that you're in. I always recommend that to people. And, social workers too need to own where the space that they're in. You're a social worker, yes, but that doesn't tell the true story. You also have to highlight the type of work that you do. So you see how I just reframe that? You're a social worker, you're working in TTPS.
Yeah.
Or in the judicial system, but I just reframed it to say you're a forensic social worker, you're doing forensic type social work. So we also have to own and look at these spaces when we do get our bachelor's degree and then we have our experience, etc. Where in terms of the spaces that we work and what categories we fall into. And I made mention of that because the association is looking at advancing licensure discussions and licensing social workers. So those specialty areas is good to have in terms of further education after your bachelor's, and depending on where you work with the client population that you like, for us to look at, the different categories of social workers, where we're at, etc. for licensure purposes as well. And I mean, it goes deeper for licensure, but that's just a touch of it.
Yeah. That is so relevant. We need to be licensed.
Yeah.
We need license because social work is a specialized profession.
Yeah.
And because we're not licensed, anybody can do social work.
Yeah, once you have a bachelor's.
Once you have a bachelor's in social sciences.
Yeah.
And sometimes that could be, we can have overlapping and lack of skill set.
Yes, in that regard. Right,
yes,
right,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Because social work is a specialized field. And so when we have overlapping, it can have overlapping in terms of how the social work is being performed on the field.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. And I like when you said that in terms of anybody, you know, right now can do social work once you have a social science degree.
Yeah.
Because you might advertise for a social worker in let's say a ministry, but you're asking for a bachelor's in a social science.
Yeah.
But you advertise for a social worker. So our licensing now would also help in terms of, as I said, if you're working in the same Ministry of Social Development, but in the Family and Services Division, you might be looking for a family service social worker with a particular skill set or specialized training in that. Same thing for Children Authority. You're not just looking for a social worker. When you see licensure happens, you might be looking for a social worker who has a speciality with dealing with children, families, communities, vulnerable young persons, or in adoption, you know, so you specialize. And we start to remove just that generalist of, you know, a social worker. Now, for some people, that might be a good and bad. Because some persons, of course, they experience alone and they have a bachelor's degree. But we have to look at, as you say, holding our standards as social workers to also international, not just local standards, but international standards. And of course, social workers in Trinidad and Tobago are guided, of course, by laws, their workplace policies, etc. But we also have to look at really being the first in the Caribbean, if it's Trinidad and Tobago, pushing and advancing licensure. What I want to mention too is, of course, we have a licensure medical social workers.
Yes.
But I'm talking about general social workers. So I wanted to put that out there too. Medical social work and psychiatric social workers
psychiatric
are registered and they're licensed and they're given a number and they have to go through training each year. But general, in terms of the other spaces, we don't have that licensure, which we really need, and it's critical for our further development.
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to have that specialized type, you know, like, yes, you have your license and you're able to practice as a recognized social worker based on your license. So if someone wants to, like a social work student or a professional or even a social worker wants to be a part of the association, what is the next step? How do they sign up? How can they be a part of the association? If they're not in the association, how does that work?
All right, to sign up for the association, as a student, you have to be enrolled in social work, be it at a bachelor's or associate or even a certificate level. You send us an email at our email address t.taswassociation@gmail.com. You send that email to us asking in terms of for the application form. We send you the application form, and there are particular documents you also have to send back to us. So if it's your letter in terms of showing that you're enrolled, a certificate of character, maybe if you're in terms of your transcript, if you're finishing in terms of your courses or you don't have in terms of the certification that you're enrolled, and a few other things that I'm not recalling. But once you send us the email, we will send you the grouping of information that you need.
Yeah.
And from there, you, of course, submit it to us and we get the application process rolling. It's a $50 fee, annual fee for students, $100 for general membership. If you are a professional social worker, we also have a category in terms of persons who honorary social workers and also international persons who may come to Trinidad to work for a short time and you want to join the association if it's for a year because you're practicing, or 3 years because you're relocated. We have that type of membership as well. So those are the 4 main categories, and you send us an email and our membership team will start to process your application.
Nice.
Yes.
So if you want to join the association, send a message, send an email,
yes,
right? So that you're able to be a part of the wonderful work the association is engaged in.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Ms. Griffith.
Yes.
Social work is such an important role in society, social workers really help the vulnerable populations. And without social workers, we have populations that will not have the type of support that they need. So, in order for a social worker to be really critical, the support is needed, the agency is needed, the country is needed, right? And so the Trinidad and Tobago Association of Social Workers is the place to start. Sign up, be a part of the association, let your voices be heard. And if we don't have social workers in Trinidad and Tobago, we can really crumble in terms of social crumbling. And we are seeing areas where there is gaps, there is lack of social work support in communities and in organizations. And we're seeing the effects when we look at the news, we're seeing the crime. When we look at the schools, we're seeing what is taking place. So there's social evidence that we need social workers. Thank you for viewing Therapy Talks, the podcast, and I hope to see you for future episodes where we delve into therapy and mental health. And as we continue to celebrate Mental Health Awareness Month, this month is May. Wear your green, ladies and gentlemen, so we can continue advocating for mental health in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.